evening, everyone, and welcome. This is Women in Waiting 23, and I'm your host, Shirley Mitchell Beaumont. And of course, you know the tagline, and I will keep on smiling every time I say it. I was born to talk. And I'm telling you, it's growing on me week after week. And having these phenomenal women with me is also helping me as well to become more concreted and cemented with this fact that I was born to talk. And I believe that these women that God is handpicking, selecting from this basket of gems are also born to talk in their own rights. And so this evening, it's another privilege I'm given, an honor, such an honor to hear this woman's testimony. And I know without a doubt, you will be impacted. Your life will change. It just by even one sentence or a word this evening can cause a difference. So I encourage you to listen. Stop whatever you're doing and sit down. If you're in the vehicle and you need to focus, park up at the side of the road and just listen to what this woman has to say. She is an advocate against gender-based violence and abuse. She is the founder of All Bracelets Alert. That's ABA movement, a special interest body which lobbied for the legislative enforcement of GPS tracking bracelets, a corresponding victim app alert, and mandatory counseling for abusers. Ms. Shears is also the founder of the Color Me Orange campaign, a call to action mobilizing others towards lobbying for legislative change. At Valdeen Tamara. So this evening with me is Miss Valdeen Shears Tamara, and I would like to emphasize as well, in this month of October, it's the month of domestic abuse awareness. And so I think God has orchestrated this, because on the 1st of October, we had Miss Figaro, and now we have this phenomenal woman. And I just want to mute my mic so I can allow her this opportunity to share her journey of waiting and how it brought her into these, I would want to hear these significant work of ministry to women and to persons who have experienced abuse. So welcome, good evening, Ms. Shears, and welcome to Women in Waiting. Go ahead, I'll mute my mic.
Hi all. And I'd like to say it is an honor to be here. It is a privilege to be able to speak on this platform. Ms. Beaumont, your smile is radiant and encouraging. And the title of your platform, Women in Waiting, is so appropriate for the journey of anyone that is coming out of domestic abuse and domestic violence or intimate partner violence or any sort of abuse, because it is actually waiting to be free. And it is also, it's not just waiting to be free physically, but it's waiting to be free mentally, because abuse is more mental than it is physical. So where do I start? It took me 21 years to finally be able to speak out and stand up for myself. And 21 years and 7 children later, that I was able to get the courage to be able to say I had enough and mean it to myself, not to the public, not to anyone that would listen, but I had to convince myself first that I had enough. that I was no longer going to be thinking that I would be his rescue, that I didn't condemn myself because I was a Christian wife, that I couldn't help him, I couldn't fix him, and that God had made us with wisdom to know the difference between staying in a mental prison and saying, God, I was made not to live in fear. So it took a great deal of courage and a whole heap of strategy to get out. And also, I want to say something. When God is ready to shift you, he aligns you. He aligns you with people and persons today that would not affect change in your life until sometimes 10 years later. Sometimes you don't even know the reason that person is in your life until that moment of shifting. And I could say that for myself because of I've seen God work in my life in so much ways, Miss Clement. So many ways. The favor of God is awesome when you know you're walking with it. And they have not always been deserving of it. And I don't say this with self-condemnation. I say it because I know. But because he's merciful, it takes away from thinking I don't deserve it. So let me just get into a little bit of what my journey was. I would have met my ex-abuser at the age of 19. And I'm from Point Forte in Trinidad. And I can say that he was an escape from country life for me. He was also a port in the storm because I didn't have all that of a good relationship with my mom, and my dad wasn't really present in my life since I was a child. So he looked like a rescue. He looked like escape for me. And then I saw these signs of abuse from very early on in the relationship, in the 21 years, actually in the first year. But I was misguided, one, as a young person, and I felt the phases. I now know the phases of the roller coaster that abuse is. I can say now that I know the phases. Before, I didn't. So I did not know about love bombing. I didn't know that they bring on all the charm, and that often you are made to feel like you're their eyeball, for want of a better term. And it's in that you hold on. And that's where the trauma bonding happens, especially if it's someone that has a similar background to you. They didn't have good parenting, or, well, I shouldn't say good parenting because our parents would have done what they could with what they had. So they didn't have the best of parenting. And we often, as we're all toting around a lot of unresolved childhood issues. So when we get someone to bond with who says, I am your person, it's very easy to become codependent. And that's what happened with me. And also becoming a Christian later on in my marriage led me to thinking, who am I to condemn him? And that if anybody should be able to save him, like Hebrews says about the praying wife, then it should have been me. So I took on that task, which it wasn't for me to take on, but I didn't know. And then because of children also, that played a large part in me staying, because I wanted to be able to say, as for me and my household, that was my dream, to be able to say that. So I would have prayed more for his deliverance than I did for mine. I mean, I thought I was saved. I prayed for him. And it took years before I could even admit to myself that I was being abused, because it wasn't regular. And a lot of persons, I have heard victims and survivors say, well, he don't hit me, we just fight. Now, that is, one is living in denial because no part of love and affection supposed to come with any form of abuse or control from one party to the other. And in a fight with a male, more than likely a female will not win. You may get some lashes in, if you're strong, but you're probably more than likely will come out the one with more bruises. So they thought that it is, we were fighting and not he was abusing me, is a consolation to the victim that it don't always happen. It's really literally mental, because you have to talk yourself out of hating. You have to talk yourself into forgiving. You have to talk yourself into things will get better. God is going to touch his life and change him and all of that. So it's all in here. It's always all in here first. So when I hear people ask, but you educated and you so bright, and how come you stay so long? They do not know the mental dynamics of what goes on in a victim's head to become and to be able to transition from the mindset of victim to survivor. The uncertainty of starting over, trying to raise your children by yourself. And worse, if you wasn't raised with a strong father figure, you want that for your children. Even though you're keeping them in a toxic environment, you're still saying to yourself, this is the father. That's the father. So I need for him to just, be delivered and then all will be well. I thought that for many years. I was in a shelter once in 2011, had to be separated from my children because the shelter rules, to some extent, I think they still are. Boy children of a certain age cannot go into a female shelter. And my eldest was a certain age. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 of them at the time. I think it was 5. My daughter, who's 13 years now, was 9 months old. She was a baby. So I got to keep her. And the others, the 4 middle children, went to home with my approval because we had to get out. The abuse had shifted to the children. And that was one of the reasons that's what made me have my, this is enough moment. And fortunately for me, I am by profession a journalist. I was a reporter for most of the marriage. And the resources I had and I was able to plug into is what would have aligned me to certain persons that were able to assist me out of that time. And Mrs. Berman, my advocacy came about because of that. And let me elaborate a little bit. When I think about the resources I had because of my profession and the favor of God combined with that to align me with the right persons to get me out. And I think about the average Jane or John Doe that don't know how to even start to come out. I told myself I had to be able to say, maybe you could do it this way because it worked for me. And my source of strength throughout my journey was God. And this is not religion I'm talking, because I cannot quote scriptures. I know 2 full prayers by heart, which is the Our Father, and it's the Lord is my shepherd, and gentle Jesus as a child. But I cannot quote scriptures. And when I say God, I mean relationship with God. I'm talking about walking from the shelter and praying and saying, God, you did this, you in charge. I'm talking about commanding my morning so that nobody could steal my joy. I'm talking about saying, Lord, put a watchman on my tongue when I wanted to cuss him. I'm talking about getting up, feeling frustrated because he was a gambler. So we were in acute poverty. We were homeless several times. We stayed in people's house. I was in debt up to my nostrils and further. I still owe people to this day. well, two organizations. But I'm trusting that God is going to abundantly overflow so that I can see about all that I have to. And I'm just grateful for platforms like yours so that I can be able to tell women, victims, there are male victims. It's hardly recorded, it's hardly reported because it's an even greater stigma attached. I thank God that in our country, we would have established the gender-based violence unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. So now gender-based violence and abuse is treated as a crime and no longer a man and woman dispute. I thank God for the Victim and Witness Support Unit of the TTPS that assists in helping victims and survivors. I thank God for the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I thank God for the many NGOs in this country that are like-minded to fight this cause, and I just want to say thanks to those in the trenches who understand that is domestic violence and abuse, gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, it doesn't affect only the victim. It affects the children who are the secondary witnesses and victims. And these are these are the reasons why I think it's so imperative that we look at legislative change that requires bystander and community reporting, that requires mandatory counseling for abusers also, because we only look at reforming the mindset and counseling the abused, and we never look at breaking the cycle of abuse by changing the mindset of the abuser. What about the children who would have witnessed these incidents? How does that carry on to their young adult life? What are the unresolved issues they are facing? How many of them would either go on to become abusers or to allow abuse into their lives because to them that was normal? We have to look at how it affects the job. I think employers don't understand how it diminishes the production and productivity of the victim. You cannot tell me that there's a human being that could have been abused last night and come to work the next day normal. That person is wearing a mask. That person is sitting next to you on the job and holding in tears. I could tell you I went many times into the bathroom at places I worked and cried. Because he either just cussed me out on the phone or I'm going home knowing I'm going home to chaos. And still I had to say, Lord, put a watchman on my tongue. Because it had literally become me in the last 5 years or so, living in fear, but deciding that God had to take charge. And also my book, when I first got the title for my book, it was called From Behind Mental Bars, because I was still in my marriage. And then God told me, no, you need to change the title. So it is now Free from Mental Bars, because who he sets free is really free indeed. I had to pray away that spirit of fear. Even when I had a protection order and I was being stalked and my family was living in fear, I had to wait. So that's why I tell you this, the title for your platform is so appropriate, Women in Waiting, because 21 years is a long time, and I went back. That's the other thing with the mindset of a victim. Because you want to, if you're a Christian, because you want to wait on deliverance and on change, you could always wait on the wrong things. God could be telling you time to get out, and you still want to do what you want to do. Because you still want the marriage, you want the children to go with the father, all of the dynamics that you're thinking in your head, because you're not leaning into the understanding of God, you're leaning into self. I had to put down self in order to say, God, you do this, you guide me, send me to the right people, whisper in the right ears. And I had to also become brave. I had to say to myself, I'm not going to allow anybody to tell me, don't be afraid, because I know who I'm dealing with. So when I had to face anyone in authority that said, you're being paranoid, or it's more than you're making of it, I had to be able to stand firm and say, no, I know who I'm dealing with. And I'm trusting God to guide me, to tell me, okay, divine protection, but also with wisdom. And it took me 21 years before I could reach that point. But in that 21 years, it was happening with time. It was happening, I was evolving. The fear was still there even up till the last day of the 21 years. But I started to feel like this was no longer about me. And that's where the advocacy kicked in. Because the minute I said to myself, I was going through that for somebody else, that's what made me brave enough to let go of the spirit of fear. One of the songs that, actually it's two songs that helped me. It was Tasha Combs' No Longer Slave to Fear. It was Marvin Sapp's Never Would Have Made It. And there was a song my 13-year-old daughter some years ago when I still had a protection order, and I was trying to get the strength to remember Command Your Mornings, Valdeen. And I was feeling a little depressed. Listen, don't get me wrong, I had my feelings of depression. I had my spirit of feeling overwhelmed. I had times when I said, I can't do this no more, God. It had times when I wanted to give up my children because I felt I couldn't protect them. It had times when I wanted to just scream. I did. I remember one morning, 2:00 in the morning, I say, God, what you doing? You don't find it enough. You don't think I had enough. Do something. Because I was out, but I was still getting threats. I still had a protection order, so I was still living in fear. And I tell myself, listen, God won't be angry with me, because he know my heart. He know I had enough. I had enough. I was tired. And my daughter was playing this song every night to go and sleep. It was Samuel Midas, I think is his name, Ready. That's the name of the song. And every night she played the song, and one night I got fed up. She was playing it to go and sleep. She was about maybe 11, 10, somewhere around there. No, maybe even younger than that, maybe 9. And she was playing this song over and over to go and sleep. And that morning I just get up and I say, I say, girl, and I was vexed. Why are you only playing this thing over and over? And something tell me, stop hearing it and listen. And I stopped and I listened to the words in the song. And when it said, remember the night you stayed up when you didn't know, and remember the passion, remember your vows. And it talk about when your faith when your knees get weak. You understand those words about stronger faith? And I say, but listen, look how a message could come from a child. Listen, that day, I sent out that song to everybody in my contact list. I didn't know who was Christian, who was other religion. I just felt like I had to share it. Something was inside of me saying, now you had to share this with somebody. There was also a time, even when I was going through what I was going through, I started to get a morning prayer from someone. And every morning I would sit down and send it out to all my contacts. Whoever messaged back and said, Mama, I don't want this prayer. I'm not a Christian. Could you please not send it? I would respect that. But for everybody else, I felt it like it was my duty. I felt like God had given me something to do. And every morning, and what Miss Berment, my phone could only send 5 by 5. I'm not tech savvy, so I didn't know I could do a broadcast list at the time. So every morning I would sit and send 5 by 5, about 1,000 people every morning. And whenever I missed, people would message, hey, Warm to my morning prayer. There were people who would tell me that, I looking forward to that. Sometimes the words were something that somebody needed at the time that I didn't know. So I would get responses from people saying, you don't know what you just do. But you see, often we doesn't recognize that our mess have a message. That the things and the trials we go through, it cannot only be for us. It has to be to help somebody else. And if I didn't take nothing else from my experience, from my journey, from my children, and from even now, that's what I took. I took that this wasn't for me. If I didn't take that, I would not be able to stand here today. And I want to say too that we need to not condemn abusers. This is not justifying abuse in any way. This is to say that the same way, in some incidences, we would have been raised in certain cultures. We would have had issues we didn't resolve as children. We would have had childhood traumas that we didn't know how to cope with. We had conflict resolution wasn't a word for us. We didn't know how to cope. We had no coping mechanism as children. We just had to live by whatever our parents decided for us and then grow with that. And then the environment speaks a lot too about how children are grown and how children are raised and then turn into young adults. So I just want to say to wrap up that I am now a mentor for victims and survivors. I was trained by Dr. Diane Douglas and Associates. And it has, now I'm in a position to actually talk to victims and survivors to show them how they can be resilient too, how they can use their own resources and they can better cope to be able to live free from violence and abuse. My book is still at the editors, publishers. It's to be printed within the next month so that it can be ready for the 16 days of activism. I'm always in orange because orange is the color against gender-based violence. And I opted to wear a piece of orange every day since 2018 when the UN coined Orange the World campaign against gender-based violence. I want to say to victims and survivors, one thing, you are not alone. You were never alone. Even when you're isolated, even when you're not sure if you're going or coming, you are not alone. Tap into your source of strength, whatever religion you are, whatever denomination, tap into that and hold on to it and be strategic and think and utilize whatever favor that source of strength presents to you to be able to come out. And Ms. Beaumont, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here and to be able to speak out and to inspire somebody towards that transitioning from victim to survivor and hopefully to advocate and mentor also.
Yes, thank you so much. It was indeed an honor. And I say this without, I'm trying to get the right words. Sometimes I'm lost for words even though I'm born to talk. But it's such an honor that after 21 years, that you can speak and speak unashamedly, knowing without a shadow of a doubt that God has certainly made you free. And if he can do it for you, then he can do it for all our sisters. All our sisters are in their crying. My God, I'm telling you this evening, this is for you. Share it with someone else. Because if he can do it for Miss Shears, then he can do it for you and for me. We do not need to suffer in silence any longer. Help is available. And while we are waiting on the return of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I encourage you, I implore you to get ready, reach out. We will put some contact numbers, we will put some links with this link so that you can make contact with Ms. Shears and become a part of this initiative if you so feel led to. But Women in Waiting 23, we are here to share your journey. Nothing is impossible with God. You that are still operating under the pimp, you that are still being used to be the drug carrier, you can be freed. I'm telling you, Women in Waiting, we are here to tell your journey of waiting and how another sister can come through. Again, it was a privilege having you, Ms. Shears, and we look forward to hearing more about what God will do with you. Thank you so much. You all, this has been Women in Waiting 23, and we are declaring a phenomenal week ahead for you as you are stepping out and discovering some new things God has in store for you. So God bless you until we connect another Sunday evening. Bye for now. Thank you, everyone.